What's going on, guys? Eric coming back at you from the Nerd Cave, and today we have something a little bit different for you. To say that I am a fan of the Resident Evil games and the franchise as a whole, I think is a bit of an understatement, perhaps. I don't know, you guys tell me. But I did want to do a quick review of the show because I ended up having a bit of, let's say, an unexpected experience with the Resident Evil Netflix show. So I did want to go ahead and touch on my thoughts on it on a few different categories and kind of give it an overall score. I'm hopeful that this video will be something that you guys enjoy and like to watch on the channel. I do have other reviews potentially planned going forward. I'm actually thinking about doing a review of Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, which is a game that I just finished, and I'm about to jump into Stray on PlayStation 5. So if you guys want to see a review of that, definitely let me know. Drop a comment below if you want to see more reviews, if you're enjoying this, enjoying my thoughts kind of on the franchise and on the show itself. So the Netflix show was not something that I was immediately sold on, and if you're a longtime fan of the franchise and you jump into it, you start watching the show, you may kind of immediately see what I'm talking about. There is just a lot of unrecognizable characters, and the show kind of jumps in a world that is more overrun by zombies. So it's kind of initial impression stuff. I'll give you guys a warning before we get into the more spoilery territory, but I'm not going to give any major plot points away in this video, so don't worry about that. Small spoilers. There are some plot point tie-ins with the original Resident Evil franchise. So I do think rather than approaching it like your typical Resident Evil game up until Resident Evil 6, before going into Resident Evil 7, other than maybe some spin-off games, it was really kind of tied into our primary core group of characters, right? So this did something a little bit different with that, and overall it was something I appreciated. So even though it affected my watchability score at the beginning, it did come to kind of grow on me, kind of like in Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 7, where we do see the tie-in with Oswald Spencer in the Spencer Mansion. So that's the mansion that you actually play in Resident Evil 1. So there were some kind of tie-ins with that in Village, and so that's how they kind of tied that back to the original Resident Evil. If you played Resident Evil 8, that is kind of the tie-in there with the Kadu and how they're kind of similar to some other creatures we see. I don't want to give too much away about the games either. Yeah, so there's definitely some stuff there that they did similarly that made it enjoyable for me. Overall, my watchability score for the Netflix Resident Evil show was 4 out of 5. I do think it's a bit of a slow burn at the beginning. If you're a longtime fan of the franchise, you may not understand that score immediately, but give it a few episodes, let it kind of come to you, so to speak. I think we all want to break the bounds of the genre and do all sorts of different things, but at its core, Resident Evil is two things. It is horror and it is action. So I did want to do kind of two different scores for those two things because I think it, unfortunately for some of the early Resident Evil fans, I do think it's skewed more heavily towards the style of Resident Evil 5 and 6 in terms of action content versus horror content. So as far as action is concerned, I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. It was super heavy on the action. The action that was in the show was really cool. So there was some awesome stuff there. Don't want to give too many specific plot points. Definitely keep an eye on Baxter. I'll say that much. But as far as the actual horror, I did only give it 2 out of 5, so I'm giving it kind of a combined score. Genre adherence, I'm going to go ahead and give it 3 out of 5 stars, just based on the fact that it didn't really adhere as far as horror is concerned. There's not a lot of like suspense and horror-y type of moments. Most of that stuff is pretty action-driven. overall, the story kept me engaged and tied in interesting ways with the original. Again, don't want to give too much away there. At the start of the show, I was really enjoying the flashbacks, but I wasn't overly sold on what was happening in the current part of the storyline because it kind of jumps back and forth between two different timelines. The story did kind of carve its own path through familiar material in interesting ways, but one thing that I wasn't like super wild about is in the future there is a lot more zombies than we typically see in kind of a worldwide setting. Like, it's not as confined as we've seen it in the past in Resident Evil games. So in that regard, that wasn't something I was in love with, but because they did such a good job with the flashback portion of things, really making you interested in the development of the characters, I did ultimately come to enjoy the characters that they did set up, and I came to enjoy more of the storyline that took place in the present. Young Billy, the actor who plays Young Billy, is excellent. I thought she did a great job. I thought both of the young ladies on the show, maybe throw some names up on screen. I do not know what their names are. I thought they both did a great job. The guy who you find out, not right at the beginning, so spoilers, is playing Wesker. But the guy who plays him, I thought was like kind of an odd choice for the typical Wesker we've seen in the games, or we've seen in other content in the past. But I did think he was just a really great actor. I've enjoyed that actor on other shows, so it was cool to see him. I think he did a great job. But the actor who plays adult Billy, terrible. Is honestly, she was really bad. So we did give it a 4 out of 5 as far as story is concerned. So I did enjoy the story a lot. There were some weak plot points, but at first when watching the Resident Evil Netflix, it seems like it's really kind of thrown out the playbook. But as things develop over the course of the show, we come to find out that that's kind of not the case, and it does kind of tie back to things you may be familiar with in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect immediately, and that does kind of make it interesting to watch. We did do a race swap with Wesker. I don't want to give anything away with his story, but let's just say by the end of it, I didn't think that actor was as odd of a choice for Wesker as I may have otherwise. Again, nothing to do with race. Doesn't matter to me that he is a different race, but as far as his demeanor, his personality, a little bit different how the actor approaches it, so stay tuned. Kind of makes sense in the end. The Lickers specifically looked exactly like you've seen them in other franchises and other movies and other games. It's something that's been pretty consistent across all media where Resident Evil is concerned. So that was nice to see again. They do, and again, spoiler, Lisa Trevor is shown. So that was definitely pretty awesome to see. And then it does seem like towards the end of the season, they do go ahead and set up for what seems like it's going to be Tyrant. It's seen here. Tyrant on the front of Resident Evil DS. So that kind of goes off the original source material in that Tyrant was the villain in Resident Evil 1. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe it's another Tyrant type zombie, and he's going to be something a little bit different. We'll just have to wait and see. Race swap, didn't matter. In the video game and show, they do touch on, and this is again a spoiler for the end of the season, so if you do want to skip this, timestamp on screen. Towards the end of the season, they do talk briefly about the Wesker, proper Wesker as we know him, dying. And in the games, we know in Resident Evil 5, this game is insane, probably one of the worst in the franchise. So chronologically, as far as we're concerned at this point in the series, that is when Wesker died. He was thrown into a volcano. Seems pretty finite. In the show, they do talk about him dying in 2009, which I thought was a neat tie-in with the video games. But they actually mentioned that he died in an explosion, which isn't necessarily exactly the same as falling into a volcano. And I do think the way that they approached it with a little bit of flashback made it seem like he maybe died the way that he originally dies in the games, which is kind of being his own team kind of goes against him and ends up killing him. As we know, he did come back from that and then die falling into the volcano in Resident Evil 5. So yeah, I mean, TBD if he's really dead, if they are just following the storyline of Resident Evil 5, but they're referring to it as explosion just to kind of spare the girls from knowing. But overall, I really enjoyed the show. I thought it was a great time. I would highly recommend watching it. There were some things for me that held it back. To me, that's true with a lot of live action Resident Evil that we've seen, and I think most people would agree with that. But overall, I honestly thought it was one of the best that they've done, and my total score, mainly because of the lack of horror, which is something I would like to see them touch on a little bit more. I did give it 3.5 out of 5 stars, so pretty great score. I think that's definitely super watchable, super enjoyable show. I would recommend checking it out. If you've been enjoying the DS or BS series, thank you so much for tuning in. That series has been doing amazing. I've got a couple more episodes coming in that series, and if we do potentially reach some goals that maybe we'll set in one of the future DS or BS series, so stay tuned for that. I'm definitely thinking about doing a sealed video game giveaway with a couple of 3DS games depending on different milestones. So definitely stick around for that, and we are going to have more golf content, more vlog content coming on Fridays. So the plan, hopefully going forward, is to get in a rotation where we're able to try to get back to putting out videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In order to do that, we're going to have the super sculpted DS or BS videos on Wednesday, potentially a different video game series to replace that in the future. We're going to look at trying to do more of these type of reviews on Mondays, and then I am also strongly considering doing more vlogs on Fridays because that is less editing heavy, it's more personal. So if you want to see more of my personal life, stay tuned on Fridays. If you're really here for the video game type of stuff, that's going to be more on Wednesdays, video game, resale, that kind of stuff. And if you want to start seeing more reviews, definitely leave a comment below because that's strongly what I'm leaning towards for Mondays. Maybe some other content thrown in there, maybe some more walkabout mini golf videos, tips and tricks, that type of stuff. We'll see. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to everybody who's taken the time to subscribe, to like, to comment on the videos. The support means a ton to me. I really hope to continue to bring you guys content that you are enjoying and give you recommendations that you appreciate and find to be generally accurate. We'll see. But yeah, thanks so much for sticking around to the end. And when you see those toys and video games, especially if they're Resident Evil, off in the distance, it's not a mirage. You guys have a great day.